All right, let me ask you something. When was the last time you launched a fresh batch of ad creative for your Meta or TikTok campaigns? If you have to think about it, that is the problem. And here's what I see over and over again with Shopify brands. A founder or, a media buyer, they find one or two kind of winning ads and they kind of ride those ads out until the performance kind of falls off the cliff. And then it's a scramble, a mad scramble, I might add. Suddenly you're trying to find like new creative. You have to find new creators. You have to negotiate usage rights. Got to wait a few weeks for delivery. And the whole time while you're waiting for this new creative, your CPAs are climbing. So the issue really isn't targeting. It's not your offer. It's really that you just ran out of creative and, you don't really have a system to replace it. And I think that's where Incense comes in. On full disclosure, I actually wrote a very comprehensive review of their platform over at ecommercefastlane.com because I think what they've built really matters for Shopify brands at the kind of growth stage and beyond. Now, Incense is a UGC and a creator marketing platform. It really does give you access to over 20,000 vetted creators across more than 35 countries. So you can launch kind of structured briefs using their templates, and you can chat directly with creators inside the platform. And every piece of content that you approve, it also comes with lifetime usage rights. Now, that last part's really huge, actually, now that I think about it. There's no more chasing permissions 6 months later when you want to reuse a top performer. And I believe really what sets apart this platform from other UGC platforms is just how much it covers under one roof. Like you don't just get raw video clips. You can run UGC campaigns. You can do product seeding. You can do Meta partnership ads and TikTok Spark ads. You can even do, this is new, but you can even do TikTok shop and affiliate programs all from within one workflow. And if you're at a stage where you don't really have the bandwidth to manage these creator relationships yourself, they even have a kind of a white glove, fully managed service where their team handles all of it end to end. So if you're a Shopify store and you're doing, $50K or more per month and you're spending a lot of money on paid social, the question really isn't whether, you need a steady pipeline of UGC, because we know you do. The question is whether are you going to continue cobbling together to make all of this work manually, or are you actually going to build a system? And I think that's the benefits of Incense. So you can check out Incense. They're spelled INSENSE.pro, incense.pro, or you can hit the link in the show notes and that'll redirect you over. I would honestly go and book a free demo. Just take a look and see what their platform is. I know it'll help your brand. So let's now jump into today's episode.
You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder, and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Well, hey there. Welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I'm your host, Steve Hutt. Now, here's a number that I think should bother every brand right now on Shopify. And I talk about this a lot, about the cost of acquiring a net new customer right now. Over the last, 3 to 5 years or so, it's certainly gone up almost 60% for acquiring customers. And I think, e-commerce brands, from some of the research I've done, they're losing almost $29 for every new customer they bring in. That's why retention strategies are so important in loyalty. But here's what really gets me, and I think this is one of the reasons why I have my guest on today, is that most brands, I think, are still making decisions based on what their ad platforms are telling them. You think about the ROAS number inside Meta or Google or TikTok, instead of maybe actually looking whether the business is actually making money or not. I think the ad dashboards are quite interesting because they say that things are working, but I'd argue that the bank account in many instances say otherwise. And the founder is kind of stuck in the middle, kind of drowning in data, but then on the flip side, kind of starving for a little bit of clarity. And I think my guest today is Matt Raminick, and he's the founder and CEO of a company called Sunnyside. And Matt has spent, almost 2 decades from my research here on the brand side. He used to work for Quicksilver, Volcom, PacSun, and he was running digital strategy for a $400 million business. and I believe he got laid off according to LinkedIn in 2020. And, he built an agency that he always wished that he could have hired by being at the Quicksilver Volcom Group. And his company is Sunnyside. And what's interesting about them is their angle is that they're a profitability first, what they call a growth partner. They exclusively work with lifestyle brands. I mean, they have this framework they're calling the Profit 360 framework, where it really connects the brand's P&L, their creative strategy, and then it also connects both the channel execution, like these paid acquisition side, all within one system. So essentially, from what I understand, and we'll learn more in a minute, both marketing and finance are now finally speaking to each other, and they're all working towards the same goals instead of being, in a silo. And so he's worked with so many brands. I think some of the brands I looked here, Brixton, Nixon, he's been Municipal, another great fashion brand. It's quite interesting. So I'm hoping that we're going to unpack like what truly is this profitability first marketing, what it actually looks like. And so, hi, Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Steve. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So let's talk about Sunnyside, like what it does, like what do you believe the core problem? I mean, I kind of prefaced it at the beginning here, but you must have an elevator pitch about, hey, I'm Sunnyside, and here is the main core problem that our company is solving for brands.
Yeah, so brands that are meaningfully trying to scale their business, whether that's from 1 to 5 million or 25 to 50 million in annual revenue, we see this all the time where they're kind of caught in this crisis, right? Like, get to this point, they've plateaued. The playbooks that they've relied on the past 4 or 5 years or so aren't delivering the same results. And so there's, just like you said, they're seeing CAC go up, they're seeing the efficacy of their ads decline. And so they're spending more on marketing than ever, but they're not profitable at the end of the day, if at all. And so but at the same time, we have more data and tools than ever, right? And we're getting all these contradictory signals that they're not able to confidently tell you where the next best dollar is spent. And so leaders are drowning in all this information day to day. You're getting different signals as far as where to spend or what to do. And on top of that, you have teams that just have no bandwidth for the bigger strategic work or money left on the table for brand building exercises. So you got this like analysis paralysis problem, and they know they need to increase their creative output. They know they need to diversify channels, improve measurement, and optimize how they're going to acquire new customers. But they're either too cash constrained because they're not profitable and losing money on first order, or they're just understaffed and unable to invest in the infrastructure expertise required because the business is unprofitable. So where we come in is to look at kind of the landscape overall, what's going on at the P&L level, where they're at with creative volume and velocity, and what the channel mix is historically. And our system comes in and helps to put in a plan in place to sort of right the ship.
Interesting about these playbooks that kind of used to work. I know a lot of them have really started to collapse. And some of the narrative that I kind of talk about on the show a lot is just like Apple's kind of walled garden. I think it started way back with like iOS 14. I think there was some, just some changes in email and some privacy changes and attribution changes. But what's your overall thought about this attribution gap that's happening and this cookie apocalypse and Apple and all that? I'm just curious about what your comments are on this.
It's the holy grail. It's like the marketing attribution thing, right? Like when I was at PacSun, we had a super complex MMM tool that was in place, and we still didn't trust it because it was just far off. So I don't believe that there's any one tool that's going to solve our problems with this. I think that it's better to cite the data that's coming out of some of the different sources we have and then triangulate it, right? So think about, tools like Triple Whale or other attribution tools, like what those are saying, what GA4 is saying, what Shopify is saying. If you have an incrementality testing tool, great. What's that saying? MMM, okay. And so, that's going to be your best bet, is to try to leverage the signals you're getting and figure out kind of where some of the overlap is. And then from there, make an informed decision. But especially as the brand gets bigger and things become more complex, the best thing to do usually is just to simplify. And, there's so much data and there's so much information we can tap into that all kind of have their own best interests in mind. And so, yeah, we've we've really thought about that on our side, and what it comes back to is just, again, like trying to simplify, trying to triangulate, get some quality signals out of each one, and then, hedge some bets against it.
It's interesting, like, your time, at PacSun and Volcom and whatnot. It's interesting that, I mentioned at the top of the show, you likely have, hired and fired a lot of agencies along the way to kind of help you and that business. Clearly, you personally need to wear a lot of hats, but you also need to hire some expertise along the way. So what did you see kind of being in that seat, of trying to locate agency partners to kind of help the overall brand story and mission and, profitability goals to then, once layoff happened in 2020, like, I got to build something similar or something completely different. I'm just curious on your mindset around that.
Yeah, what I kept running into was this gap between what agencies were optimizing for and what actually mattered to the business. And so they would show up with these really great decks and impressive numbers and solid ROAS, and we'd still be losing money. Yeah, and especially at a business like PacSun, contribution was the number one thing that the executive team looked at. And when we were seeing it sort of plateau, even though spend was going up, it was kind of a red flag. And so when I eventually left the corporate side, I wasn't looking for a better agency to go to work at or to partner with. It was more like, let's take this knowledge and sort of build one. And so we tried to look at that sort of profit first lens from the beginning and think about ways that we can meaningfully improve the bottom line. And sometimes that came at the expense of performance, right? So what I mean by that is, if you look at some of our Meta accounts, for example, you might see in there that it's a really simple campaign structure and it's not overly complex when it comes to some of the targeting or anything, just due to the inherent way that platform now operates with the creative velocity thing. But you might see ROAS down in the 2-3x range. But at the same time, if you go and we back that into an overall MER number, and we look at CAC and we're profitable in first order, and the contribution goal is where it needs to be, it might signal that we can actually spend more and still be profitable. And so, it differs by each business. And I'd say that we have some brands that are more interested in growing their top line and are okay with either breaking even on first order new customer or even losing a little bit of money because it's more of an LTV play and they're thinking longer term, or they know that the average customer is going to purchase 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So it just depends. But I'd say that it was frustrating that you had a lot of agencies that looked at in-channel metrics and sort of benchmarked their success on what those numbers looked like. And it's really easy to inflate ROAS. You just target past customers, right? And so we see that all the time. It's one of the first things we look for when we audit a new account.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I just want to make sure that I share with the listeners about contribution margins. I think it's a really important topic. Like, for me, in a high level, and I'm sure you can dig a little deeper into it, but it's kind of like the revenue that's left over after you kind of subtract a lot of the variable costs tied to selling the product. So, and that's what's contributing. And I think about, like, for a Shopify brand, like, the math would look like, I guess, let's say, revenue minus, let's say, cost of goods minus shipping, minus transaction fees, I don't know, minus ad spend to acquire that customer. And I guess what's left over is the contribution margin. And like, so I don't, I just use an example here. I'm thinking out loud here, but you have a product that's $100 and it costs you $30 to make it, let's suppose, and $8 to ship it, and $3 in Shopify fees or whatever, and $20 in ad spend. If my math is right here, like, it seems like I'm making $39 in margin, which would be a 39% contribution margin in that particular case. But I think it's different. As you said, the ROAS number is different than the contribution margin number, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, and it varies, right? Like, if your margin is better at the product level, it definitely helps. And in some brands decide to include some costs and some don't. For example, it's like, you could argue, oh, well, we did this photo shoot, or we paid these creators or influencers some money, so we're going to put that in there too. So it depends at the business level, but that's exactly it. It's revenue minus variable costs.
I see. So let's talk a little bit about this Profit 360 framework, because it seems interesting to me. I think, let's suppose a brand is doing, I don't know, $15 million a year and has never heard of it. Because there's lots of mid-market brands that are listening today. They're just like, hey, I, feel that, I, first of all, finance and acquisition people are in kind of, unfortunately, two different silos. They do meet every quarter probably for a QBR of some sort. And the CEO definitely knows what's going on generally, but maybe not day to day. What's your whole framework around Profit 360? And then what does it connect? And then how does it allow you to make decisions for the business?
Yeah, thanks for that. I love talking about this because it stems from my experience and our team's experience working in-house. And so aside from myself, most of our team all come from the brand side. And so we kind of thought it through like, okay, how would we set this up if we were sitting in an e-com department? What would we be looking at, and how would we tell the story of what's going on with the business, and how would we effectively try to forecast things out? And so the framework was born, to sort of look at a way to bridge the gap to finance and speak the same language as the CFO, and really think about the outcomes that move the business forward, not just those sort of vanity platform metrics, which, as much as I bash on like ROAS numbers and platform metrics, it's still important, right? Like we're still optimizing off of that day to day. But this kind of goes up one more level. And so essentially, when we thought this through, it became Profit 360 because we wanted a repeatable framework that could apply to a brand doing $1 million a year or a brand doing $100 million a year. And what that means is we come in and we bring in the P&L at the brand level for the e-com business. We look at it monthly and annually. We tie in the go-to-market planning and the product planning side of things. So what I mean by that is, what are the key drivers from the marketing and brand side that are going to help the brand achieve those numbers, the forecast numbers? And what are the products, and what are the heroes, and what are some of the evergreens that are going to support that down to the monthly level? And sometimes we come in and they've got the brand. We work with a lot of apparel brands. So for example, we might see the line review, or we talk to the planner and the buyer, and we say, hey, what's your buy? Like, what does this look like at seasonal level? We get that. And so we can see sort of the product mix and the penetration down to the product level and the category level. And so we take that, we bring in the creative strategy, just knowing now how much creative has an impact on performance. And so we'll develop full creative strategy around what the ads should look like, when those should deploy based on the calendar. And then that trickles down to the channel execution. So it's sort of this like inverted triangle where you used to have channel execution at the top and then the reporting at the bottom, but we're starting the other way around to try to inform what's actually going to happen at the channel level and where we're going to deploy ads and dollars to hedge some bets there based on the brand and where we think we're going to be able to acquire a customer at the lowest cost. And so that really, that gives clients a little bit more clarity on where they should invest, confidence in the forecast. And we're sort of looking at the profitability number or goal as like our North Star from day one.
I see. So what about these are other metrics that I think are important, are like the repeat purchase rate, and certainly customer lifetime value is important too. How do you incorporate all of that into your framework?
We actually start with repeat customer. That helps us to at least inform a baseline. It's like, okay, if your repeat rate is 50% and we know that we can rely on this many orders per month, that gives us the delta in terms of how many new customers we got to go out and acquire. And sometimes if there's an imbalance and repeat's too high, then we know we've got a little bit more work ahead of us to go out and bring that down a little bit more, because we don't want to just keep squeezing the sponge. We just want to make sure that we're getting enough new people in and building some awareness. And it depends on the product too. We work with some higher AOV brands, and the consideration cycle is just so much longer. And so that's a caveat too, where you can get stuck looking at some of the platform metrics and say, well, hey, why is our ROAS low? It's like, well, because we're targeting 80-90% new customers that aren't aware of the brand yet. And that purchase is happening outside the attribution window. But we can see, like, if you look at the trend line, that new customers increasing, right? So overall, if you look in Shopify, what's happening in there? So that's, so we start with repeat in mind. We let email and SMS and some of the retention channels do the heavy lifting there.
I see. This is more of a side note, but how do subscription businesses, because there are some subscription apparel business. I know there's like sock companies, underwear, there's all these different companies. Like, how does that fit into the mix? Because that is, I mean, I think at the beginning of the month or having a certain amount of active customers on a subscription, you kind of can at least forecast that, knowing that even supplement companies, you can really forecast that. So what's your mindset around that?
That's a good question. I personally, I'll admit, I don't have a ton of experience with the subscription, but I do know that in talking to some folks who do, that it does create a little bit more predictability because you can start to understand like what the typical repeat cycle is going to be and focus on kind of what those are, especially if it's like in a fixed window, like where you're like, okay, it's a monthly replenishment or it's biweekly or whatever. And then backing out sort of like the expected lifetime value of what that customer is going to be. So I think if a subscription brand came to us tomorrow, that's probably where we would start, is just try to back out the cohort analysis and try to better understand that like CAC to LTV ratio, like what are those payback windows over 90, 120, 180 days, and then start to formulate that. And it changes things a little bit from first order profitability because you might see that number actually go up pretty high, and then it backs off like over time, depending on if they renew. So that's where things kind of get interesting. I think you'd have to look at a much longer time frame for sure.
What about the creative? I read somewhere, just kind of in my research, that you talk a little bit about how these ad platforms are now kind of treating the creative quality really as a targeting mechanism now. It's a little bit different. Like there's been this shift over the last few years. Like what does that actually mean for a brand, that how they should think about like their ad creative like right now?
It's the number one bottleneck that we come across at the moment, is just keeping up with the creative velocity required to fuel these channels, right? And it all kind of goes back to when Meta shifted to Andromeda and got away from more of the detailed interest targeting, and it put more pressure on brands because now the algorithm is in the platform is using the creative and the signals built into the creative to figure out who to put it in front of as far as the targeting goes. And so what that means in practice is, based on the spend, the amount of creatives required can go up or down. So let's say you have a Meta account and you're spending $1,000 a day. Well, that's going to back into a specific number of creatives, and not just statics or videos. You got to remember that there's multiple buckets to fill. There's the creator UGC bucket. There's, with reels and partnership ads, and then there's video and carousels and statics. And so it's the first thing that ends up being a bottleneck in most cases when we take a peek under the hood, where they're kind of stuck in the old ways where you have a lot of brands that will go out and do like a big seasonal photo shoot and come back with a bunch of assets and then deploy those assets. And the platform goes through them so fast now that, because it's the way that you acquire scale again with Meta, for example, is to constantly be feeding it more creative, right? So you're doing refreshes almost weekly, in some cases daily. And by the time you get back from that photo shoot and you've depleted all those assets, you're kind of stuck. It's like, okay, we need more, and we're constantly trying to feed it. And so anyways, the solve though is just more iterations, right? And more angles, more different, more views, more creative diversity. We talk a lot about that. More UGC, more creator content. So a lot of brands struggle with it, and it's something we talk about a lot.
I've actually written a little bit about this kind of creative challenges right now, and like for Shopify brands specifically. And I think there's a couple different ways I've looked at it. Like one is like the static part of it, which is, and there's also great AI tools out there. And every brand makes their own decisions about how they're using them, but they're getting better and better. I think of like, AdCreative.ai or Pencil is interesting. And then obviously some of the basics like Midjourney and ChatGPT and things like that. But then there's even like the video creative side of it now that's available through Runway or Creatify. There's a few others that are out there. But the whole idea is that, there are some great AI tools that can, take your full brand, import it all, and really help continue to feed the beast, so to speak, and then do A, B, and C tests like nonstop. And then the idea is that, well, what are we doing for the analytics or to test if it's actually working? I mean, you talked about Triple Whale. I've heard a lot about Northbeam as another interesting marketing intelligence platform, or even Motion. So it's interesting. There are tools to create both static and video assets on brand with live actors or even with AI generated photo shoots and video. But then there still is like a back office opportunity through Triple Whale, North Beam, or Motion, I guess, to analyze some of that data too.
Yeah, exactly. As far as the data goes, yeah, we're looking at thumb stop rate and we're looking at conversion rate and click throughs and all that kind of stuff. And to your point about content generation at scale, we are at a point now where you can supplement your photo shoots and the content creation efforts you're doing with AI. And I don't think it's quite there yet with video. Like we've seen some promising sort of.
That's true.
It won't be long, but with the statics, we're actually using it a lot. And our point of view, though, is that you still have to have really good reference material. And so the photo shoots the brands are doing, the seasonal content creation efforts that they're making, all of that is still totally valid. Where this comes in is to help you supplement it and get you to a place where you can turn 10 assets into 100 really quickly.
Yeah, this is amazing. I did a tiny bit of also more research before recording today, and I love the warm and fuzzy about getting maybe a case study out of you today. And there's a couple that I've seen kind of live on the site, Beak, which are these handmade sandals, and I think there's even Municipal is listed on here. I'm sure you have other case studies. Is there any one that you can talk about publicly and saying, hey, here's what their life was without us. They came to us with this challenge. They got involved in this Profit 360 program, and then here's how things look for them on the other side now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brixton's a good example. It's kicked off an engagement with them at the beginning of the year, and they came to us and had a lot of really ambitious growth goals this year. We're really looking to focus their efforts more on being profitable and thinking about the bottom line a bit. And so it was a really great match for us because a lot of our team come from similar brands to them. And so we came in and, like you and I were just talking about before we started, we just closed Q1, right? So we're starting to look at sort of where we landed. And yeah, the challenge with them was they had a lot of stories. They had a lot of different products they wanted to talk about. Their catalog is quite large. So we helped to sort of streamline the focus a little bit more instead of thinking about, a dozen different stories per month. Like we've focused inward a little bit more on like what are the 3 or 4 that we can hedge our bets against based on, again, like looking at the inventory available, what the buy was, how much of that product was expected to carry the weight as far as hitting the goal, the revenue goal. And then we aligned all our creative efforts on that. And then, yeah, just trickling down to the channel execution, just being really, really intentional about what channels we're on, iterating. And then the other thing too, that I think sets us apart a little bit more and helps us to see results a little bit faster is that we get really embedded in the business. And I think that was one of the reasons why they came to us in the first place. It was just because of our model and the inherent way that we work. And so what in practice, that just looks like some really deep conversations around cohorts and particular customer types and looking at what products are the most profitable versus ones that aren't, but have, franchise the capability behind it to be able to expand on over long term and build into. And so a lot of that happened really fast in January. And I'm happy to say, though, we ended Q1 really strong. We were up, I think last I looked was around 25-30% up against their goal. And so, yeah, great results all around. They have really ambitious growth goals this year, though. So we're setting a foundation. We're really trying to think about this long term and see through a successful year with them. But yeah, off to a good start. But again, a lot of it stemmed from just sharpening focus, really getting the creative in tune with the product and what was resonating with the customer. And again, like just trying to keep things simple. Try to think through how to do fewer things better at the end of the day.
It comes down to this whole like analysis paralysis too. I think that's one of the things that I think about a lot, and I talk about it on the show because it seems every week I'm bringing on either a new agency founder like yourself solving some great problems, or maybe a SaaS founder that is kind of building something that Shopify doesn't build yet and is added on as an app or a marketing platform that connects. And I think sometimes people get a little bit overwhelmed, or is this right for me? Like, what do you say to people that are like kind of in that mode where they don't know what they don't know. Like they know that maybe they're not quite as profitable as they can be. And hence why they're listening to the show right now. They're thinking, well, is there any little takeaway, any tidbits I can get, or maybe it's, a conversation with your team. Like I just don't know what the next steps are because people don't realize, number one, that you were available. And that's why I wanted to have you on, that you do have this Profit 360 opportunity. And there is ways of really aligning creative and the P&L together with a proper plan. And so I just want to kind of hear what you believe kind of some potential next steps are for those that are listening.
Yeah, we think of it as like a low friction sort of diagnostic, right? Like if we get called in and we'll pull in all the data. So we like to grab everything from Shopify, all the channels where you're spending. And we look at the creative, do a creative audit, and just try to get a vision of what's going on and what historically has happened over the last 2 or 3 years. And so from there, we're looking at where some of the leaks might be, whether that's creative velocity or new customer acquisition. What's, again, like what's that ratio between new and returning, and then come back with like an itemized list of where to prioritize. Usually it comes down to a few things. It's again, like the creative bottlenecks, which everyone's dealing with, but it could be that, hey, what you have in marketing is pushing product that has limited stock. You keep selling out of this stuff. So let's think about maybe building some equity in some different products, or thinking through what the offer is or what the message is. And I'd say that, yeah, there's no one size fits all, but when you pull in all this information and you look at it in a way that, again, across the business level, the P&L, the creative, and then at the channel level, you really start to be able to paint a picture of where some of the opportunity is pretty clearly, actually. And that helps to formulate a roadmap. Whether we work together or not, we like to at least hand off something that could be meaningful and impactful to the business no matter what.
Yeah, what's interesting too is when I think about the P&L in general, there's one of the things that I just want to hit home before we kind of wrap up for today. But when I think about these other costs that can hit the P&L, I think about the logistics, the kind of return management kind of challenges that happen, where especially in fashion, there seems to be quite a large cost that goes along with having to, wrong sizes, or people that are just kind of the fraud and abuse that can happen. And that kind of, is it an A, B, or C kind of grade quality return? Is it destroyed? And it all comes out of the bottom line. Look, have you heard, since you're in fashion and apparel, and then there's, half of Shopify is fashion and apparel. And so knowing that, is there any insights that you've seen in your years and now in the agency about how are people handling their returns management, and knowing that there can be abuse, it does hit the bottom line, and because once again, if you don't have a return policy, people are probably not going to want to shop with you. But then there's all these tools like Loop and Narvar and all these things, and they're given instant credits, and they assume you're sending the product back, but then a brick comes in the package instead, and it sits over in the corner for 2 weeks, and then you finally realize, and then they've skipped town, and it can be quite a crazy opportunity. And I know there's porch pirates and all that. What's your overall thought about the logistics side of a brand in today's day and age?
Yeah, I mean, returns are a big deal, especially with like footwear brands. We see typically pretty high return rates because you have sizing inconsistencies, and people like to order a few different pairs and try them on at home, send them back. I'd say though, in general, we've been pretty fortunate. We've not seen widespread fraud or any kind of just issues to the level where it becomes a nuisance. But you mentioned a couple of tools, and I do think that we've come a long way in the last few years just with what happens on the other side of the order. And so, yeah, like instant credit, just making it really frictionless for people to make a return, all of that really comes into play. But, I think there's a retention play here too, right? So you can think about how that ties into something like loyalty, right? So if you have a loyalty program, make it so your loyalty members get free returns, but you have a restocking fee for anyone else that doesn't or isn't a member. So what does that potentially look like? And then same thing on the other end, right? Like enable free shipping for loyalty, but not for anyone who's not in it. So yeah, I think though, Steve, there's certainly some, like you mentioned Loop, like for example, Aftership, there's some of these out of the box solutions that they've come so far. They're really good now, and just making it mobile friendly. And even now with some of the, you have those return banks where you can like actually go do a physical return now.
Absolutely. At FedEx depots and stuff like now.
Yeah.
I think Happy Returns is part of PayPal now. And yeah.
Yep, exactly. So they're making it way easier, but it's a fine line, right? Because you don't want to make it so easy that you're just getting people who come in and buy with the intent to just return it. So, but I'd say, yeah, it's something to factor in. That's why we always look at net revenue as kind of like our North Star, because if you're just tracking against top line or gross, then you're going to miss out on some of that, which kind of hides underneath it. So it's definitely something to factor into, especially as you sharpen your focus more on being profitable.
This is very cool. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Matt. Like, thank you. I'm on, like, I joke on the show, but I'm on page 2 of notes. So life of learning mantra, right? That's me. So what about those brands that are listening right now? They're thinking, hey, maybe this is what I need, or this Profit 360 thing is very interesting to me. I'd like to learn more. I'm going to pass the torch to you now, the baton, so to speak, and say, like, what do you believe some of the next steps are for those mid-market brands that are listening right now, that are in your sweet spot? They have enough data, they have enough revenue to kind of justify maybe having a look to see if there's some way you can serve them.
Yeah, if this hit home and you're wrestling with it inside the brand, just send me a DM on LinkedIn, Matt Raminick, and I'll share what we've seen work and what we've seen usually not work. We're always happy to hop on and hear. We love connecting with new people. Our website is sunnysidecalifornia.com. There's plenty of information on there about kind of what we do and some of the brands that we've worked with and been successful with. But again, yeah, best place to reach me is on LinkedIn. I post on there quite frequently and always love to share insights. And yeah, I hope to hear from you guys.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love the vintage artwork and the black and whites on your website. It's very unique. It's certainly right on brand, and I love the Sunny TV. I actually played around with it this morning and flipping all the channels and stuff. I was like, oh man, this is great.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, it's super
Love
cool. This
Yeah,
is really,
thanks.
really cool. All right, Matt. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. I wish you continued success. Thank you for like serving our community of like these founders and marketers of these Shopify brands, and other CMSs too. But it's just interesting that you have it sounds like you have a great framework and you have some great case studies. I want to wish you continued success, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much, Steve.
All right, take care. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.